Stuff I Learned Yesterday, episode 605. Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza. Welcome to Stuff I Learned Yesterday. My name is Daryl Darnell. My favorite song to sing loud to in the car is Livin' on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. And I believe that if you aren't learning, you aren't living. As a child growing up in the 80s, there were a lot of great TV shows to enjoy. One of my favorites was Who's the Boss? Tony Danza, Judith Light, Danny Pintaro, and Katherine Hellman were all great, but I watched the show for Elisa Milano. As far as I can recall, she was my first TV crush. Who's the Boss was my introduction to Elisa, but it wasn't my introduction to Tony. My introduction to Tony came from the TV show Taxi. Apparently, I wasn't the only person who appreciated the work Tony did on Taxi. After all, Elton John wrote an entire song about him. You know it, so sing it with me. Hold me closer, Tony Danza. Count the headlights on the highway. Wait, what? Those aren't the right lyrics? Elton is singing Tiny Dancer? Okay, that explains the title of the song then. My mistake. Now you know I'm joking, of course. Maybe you've never sung the wrong words to Tiny Dancer, but I bet you've flubbed up other songs. Here are some other often misquoted lyrics. Let me know in the comments or on social media if you've been guilty of flubbing up any of these. There's Starships, we built this city. The wrong lyric, we built this city on sausage rolls. The correct lyric, we built this city on rock and roll. How about Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody? The wrong lyric, saving his life from this warm sausage tea. Of course, the correct lyric is spare him his life from this monstrosity. How about Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze? Wrong lyric, excuse me while I kiss this guy. And the correct lyric is excuse me while I kiss the sky. A few more here. The Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. The wrong lyric is sweet dreams are made of cheese. And of course, the correct lyric is sweet dreams are made of this. Maybe you've said sweet dreams are made of these? Yeah, that's still wrong. It's sweet dreams are made of this. All right. Taylor Swift's Blank Space. The wrong lyric is all the lonely Starbucks lovers. And the correct lyric is got a long list of ex-lovers. One more. R.E.M's Losing My Religion. The wrong lyric is, let's pee in the corner, let's pee in the spotlight. Of course, the correct lyric is, that's me in the corner, that's me in the spotlight. Well, how'd you do? For me, I can hear all of those wrong, but I've actually been singing all of those correctly, except for that Eurythmics song. That's the one I sang wrong for years before I realized that she was singing this instead of these. I think she needs to work on her enunciation a little bit. Well, anyway, imagine this. It's the year 2000. My wife and I were celebrating our first wedding anniversary. We had just survived the Y2K apocalypse. Coldplay released their debut album. Sony released the PlayStation 2. Survivor aired its very first season. Disney released The Emperor's New Groove. And 3 kids from England named Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint were announced as the leads for the upcoming Harry Potter movie franchise. My wife and I were living in Lubbock, Texas at the time of this story, although we moved to Wichita Falls, Texas later that same year. When we moved to Lubbock, we visited several churches trying to find one that was faithful in teaching the Bible and where we could get involved. After visiting several, we finally landed at a church of several hundred situated on the south part of town. I got involved with the choir, and we found a Sunday school class for young married couples that we enjoyed. One morning, the teacher of this class showed up and told us that he was going to teach us something about a well-known verse that he bet we'd never heard before. He had us turn to the Old Testament book of Isaiah, and there he read a verse that was indeed very well known. I'd heard preachers preach about that verse several times before, and much to my surprise, his take on it was indeed something new. I was really impressed with his insight and how he'd brought something new to the verse. I found his take on the verse to be very interesting and insightful. In fact, a few weeks later, I found myself back in Oklahoma City attending a youth event at my old church, and I asked the youth leader if I could lead a devotional. The truth was, I wanted to show off to my old youth leader. I wanted to take this verse and reveal the new spin that I'd learned from my church in Lubbock. I wanted to be looked upon with the same sense of spiritual maturity and insight as I had for my teacher at my new church. To my surprise, the youth leader agreed. So, when the time came, I stood up in front of the group, had them open their Bibles to that passage, and told them that they'd probably heard the verse taught one way, but I was going to teach them something new. I then proceeded to tell them my new insight, and after a few minutes of teaching, I handed it back over to the youth pastor. Not one, not even the youth pastor, cared about what I had said. The kids just wanted me to shut up and get it over with, and the youth pastor, he'd basically checked out. He'd taken a new job at a new church, and this was his last weekend at that church. Hoping to get my ego stroked, I got nothing. The fact is that pretty much everything I did that night was wrong. I showed up not having fully prepared. That is, I didn't rehearse or study or think ahead of time about what I should say. I didn't meet with the youth pastor to discuss me having teach in advance, nor did I share my new revelation with him. I allowed myself to be motivated by my ego. Worst of all, I hadn't studied the scripture for myself to see if this new teaching was even in line with the truth of what that passage was saying. Now, I know some of you are wondering if I'm ever going to tell you what the passage in question is. Of course I am. It's Isaiah 40:31, which says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Most people who teach this passage focus on the phrase of the verse and really focus on the word wait. That was also the focus of the new teaching as well. The thing is, translation is a tricky thing. Just as in English, words can have multiple meanings. We derive intended meaning by looking at the context of what is being said. I touched on this recently in episode 592. When it comes to studying the Bible, we don't just have context within the passage to help guide us, but we have other books and resources as well. For the most part, the original languages of the Bible are Hebrew for the Old Testament and Greek for the New Testament. Fortunately, we don't have to speak Hebrew or Greek to be able to look at those original words and derive their intended meaning. Learning Hebrew and Greek will always be best, but for those who aren't original language scholars, we can tap into resources that biblical language scholars have created for us. I knew this, and I had access to those resources, but I didn't consult any of them. In today's internet age, a great resource is Bible Hub. Using this resource, I can tell you that the original Hebrew word in that sentence is kavah. Its definition is to wait for. I can also see where this exact Hebrew word is used in other Bible passages, and I can see how it was translated in each of those passages. This allows me to better understand the context for the usage of the word itself. As I look at other examples of this word, I see things like wait, hope, expect, long, look eagerly, and patience. Every teaching I'd ever heard about this passage taught it with those meanings in mind. I'll read it again with those words, and you'll see how learning the word's usage across the Old Testament makes its meaning clear. But they that wait, hope, expect, long, look eagerly, and wait patiently upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. So, what was this new teaching? The new teaching looked only at the English use of the word wait. Of course, we use the word wait in the intended context of the passage, but that's not the only way we use the word. If you saw the thumbnail for today's episode, then you were given a clue. We also use the word wait when referring to the staff who help us at a restaurant. That person is often referred to as a waitstaff or a waiter or a waitress. Using this definition of the word, the idea is that if we will serve God, He will renew our strength. We will walk and not faint. We will run and not be weary, etc. There are two fancy sounding words that come to mind here. Those words are exegesis and eisegesis. And while those words may sound like they have something to do with Jesus, they don't. Exegesis is spelled E-X-E-G-E-S-I-S, and eisegesis is spelled E-I-S-E-G-E-S-I-S. Exegesis is the explanation of a text based on a careful study and objective analysis. The word exegesis literally means to lead out of. This means that one draws conclusions by following the text. The opposite approach to interpreting Scripture is eisegesis, which is the interpretation of a passage based on a subjective, non-analytical reading. The word eisegesis literally means to lead into or put into, which means that one injects their own ideas into the text, making it mean whatever he wants. I think it's clear that what the guy at my church taught and that which I then parroted was an example of eisegesis, not exegesis. Here's what I learned. Fortunately, what I taught about God was true. That is, as we serve God, He will give us strength and help us. However, that's not what that specific verse is saying, and therefore what I taught was false. As a Bible teacher, I am held accountable by God for what I teach. The book of James teaches us that teachers are held to a higher standard and are responsible for their work. Responsibility doesn't just fall upon teachers of the Bible, though. The book of Acts tells us about a group of people who lived in Berea that were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the Scriptures daily, whether or not those things were so. That is, we are better when we take time to study Scriptures for ourselves, to make sure that what others are teaching us is accurate. It's one thing to get song lyrics wrong. It's something else entirely to get Scripture wrong. In the 3rd chapter of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, Satan said to Eve, "Did God really say?" That cunning tactic is one that he is still using today. In more ways than I or any of us realize, he creeps into teaching and into people's lives. He takes what has been understood as truth and he whispers, "Did God really say?" I firmly believe that we live in an age where it has never been easier to know the truth about God and His teaching, while also having never been easier to be deceived and led astray about God and His teaching. We hear something new, something that's easier to swallow, less offensive, seems loving, or seems to bring a shiny new meaning to a passage that has been taught a certain way for generations. And too often, we fall for it. Federal agents in the U.S., Canada, and I'm sure other countries around the world identify counterfeit currency by first studying real currency. They touch, tilt, look at, and look through real currency. They study it. They find out what qualities are true about real currency at a deep, first-hand level. By studying the authentic money, they are equipped to spot the fake stuff. As Christians, this should be our approach to studying Scripture, too. I know not all of you are Christians, and I'm truly grateful that you listen to these episodes and that you've made it this far into what is a longer than normal episode. My hope for you is my hope for us all. That is, that we will all take the opportunity to study the Bible and lean into Jesus' promise that if you hold on to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I'm Daryl Darnell, and this has been Stuff I Learned Yesterday. I want you to be a part of the next Monday Mailbag on September 30th. Monday Mailbag is your opportunity to share what you've learned so that other listeners and I can learn from you. It can be a message as short as 30 seconds, or it can be several minutes long. It really doesn't matter, just as long as it's something that will benefit others. You can send in questions or responses to my SILY episodes like this one, and I'll respond to them via Monday Mailbag episodes. You can participate in Monday Mailbags by visiting the Golden Spiral Media listener feedback page at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback, or shoot me an email at feedback@goldenspiralmedia.com.